Welcome to Navigating Follow-Up Reports and Visits. This webinar is a property of the Middle States Commission on Higher Education. Reproduction, distribution, or transmission of the presentation in part or in whole is expressly prohibited without prior written consent from MSCHE. For permission request, email MSCHE at president@msche.org. I always remind you that this last sentence says this presentation is not intended as a substitute for professional advice from MSCHE staff, and use of the presentation does not guarantee any specific accreditation outcome. My name is Zigna Corbett. I'm a Vice President for Institutional Field Relations, and with me today is Dr. Christy Faison. She's a Senior Vice President for Accreditation Services. As usual, we have identified learning goals for this session. The learning goals are that after participating in this session, participants will be able to understand Commission actions which request follow-up, understand the types of follow-up which may be requested by the Commission, understand the expectations for each type of follow-up request, prepare and submit follow-up reports, understand the purpose of follow-up visits after submission of reports, work with institutional stakeholders to prepare for the follow-up visits, work with the team chair to develop the agenda for the visit, and plan to host a follow-up visit. On the screen, you will see our graphic for the accreditation cycle and monitoring. This is a graphic that you're very familiar with. As you can see, the MSCHE has an 8-year accreditation review cycle. And it begins with a self-study evaluation visit, follows 4 years later with the midpoint peer review, and then 4 years hence, again, the self-study evaluation. But during that 8-year period, the MSCHE also engages in ongoing monitoring activities. Those monitoring activities may be the annual institutional update, AIU, recommendations, responses, follow-up reports and visits, and supplemental information reports. Those are the ones that we are talking about today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Faison to talk about why you got a follow-up report.
Thank you, Dr. Corbett. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Yes, I'm going to attempt to answer that all-encompassing question. Why did my institution get a follow-up report? Well, it could be for any one of the reasons you see on your slide. It could be because the Commission needs assurance that the activities that you have planned or that you are implementing are being carried out. The Commission may need evidence that you have made appropriate improvements. The Commission may have concerns about your institution's ongoing compliance with one or more of the Commission's standards, requirements, policies and procedures, or federal regulations. It could be that the Commission has already identified a non-compliance issue. Or finally, following return to reaffirmation, the Commission needs evidence that the implemented corrective measures have been sustained. Now you see before you the 7 standards for accreditation. I hope you are already thoroughly familiar with these. Whenever there is follow-up, it is aligned with either our standards, requirements, policies and procedures, or federal regulations. Although follow-up has occurred across all of our standards, there are some frequent flyers with respect to follow-up. The standards which have caused the most amount of follow-up in the past 3 years are standards 5, educational effectiveness assessment, and standards 6, planning, resources, and institutional improvement. We've also had some non-compliance issues related to standard 2, ethics and integrity, and standard 7, governance, leadership, and administration. You can get follow-up regardless of whether it's a non-compliance issue or if you are in compliance, but the Commission needs additional information. Because we know that some of our standards are frequent flyers, we have been providing webinars related to assessment, planning, and governance. The following slide shows our requirements of affiliation. We also request follow-up related to these 15 areas. The ones that you see highlighted in red, again, are our frequent flyers. Requirements of affiliation 8, 9, 10, and 11. And if you read them closely, you will see that they are aligned with standards 5 and 6. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about the types of findings you get whenever you receive a report from a team that has visited your campus. You may get a report that provides many accolades, significant accomplishments, significant progress, exemplary practice, innovative practices. Those are all wonderful things, and we don't follow up on those. You don't have to report back to the commission when you get information about significant accomplishments. You may also receive collegial advice. That is when your peer evaluators provide for you some suggestions for continued improvement or for innovative practices. This is just what it says, suggestions. And again, collegial advice does not lead to follow-up. Recommendations are given when peer evaluators express concern and believe that the institution should pay particular attention to the items that they have denoted. Recommendations may lead to follow-up. It can be specifically cited in a commission action or as part of an evaluation visit. The next time you're up for self-study, you may respond to recommendations that were given in a previous report. Finally, there's the area of requirements. Requirements are issued by peer evaluators whenever they feel there is non-compliance with the standards, requirements, policies, and procedures, or federal regulations. Requirements always require follow-up, and it will be specified in any commission action that you receive. The kind of follow-up that the commission requests will be in the commission action. And right now I'm going to explain some of the kinds of reports and feedback you may be asked to submit. The first one I'd like to talk about is called a supplemental information report. Your VP liaison may refer to this as an SIR. So if you hear about an SIR, it's the supplemental information report, which is requested when an institution is in compliance, but the commission needs further evidence that the institution is carrying out activities that have been planned or newly implemented. I want to talk about one particular use of SIR that has happened related to COVID-19. And this may apply to some of the institutions participating in this afternoon's webinar. For some institutions that hosted virtual visits, your team may have cited issues of non-compliance in your team report. At the committee level, when your documentation was received, your commission action says that the action has been postponed, the decision has been postponed, and we're asking for an SIR. This is a special policy modification that we put in place because of COVID-19 and because of the use of virtual visits, which was relatively new for us. And so institutions that hosted visits from spring 2020 through spring 2021 may have received such an action where the decision is postponed and you must submit an SIR. Regardless of the circumstances, responding to this kind of request for follow-up is the same. And my colleague, Dr. Corbett, will explain more about the guidelines for submitting the report. The next type of follow-up report that the commission can request is called a focused report. A focused report is requested after a midpoint peer review. Whenever there's a midpoint peer review and serious concerns are uncovered, the commission may ask for a focused report. The focused report will always be followed by a focused team visit. and your VP liaison may or may not accompany the team after the submission of that report. A monitoring report is associated with non-compliance. So if the commission action has placed the institution on warning or probation, a monitoring report will be requested. Monitoring reports are always followed by on-site follow-up visits. Of course, right now we have been operating virtually. And these type of visits, your VP liaison will accompany the team. One other item that I'd like to bring to your attention, if the commission found probation, you may also be asked to submit a teach-out plan. For more information about developing and submitting teach-out plans, you can visit our policy tab on our website. There we will have information and even a template that you could use if your institution is requested to submit a teach-out. The most serious form of follow-up is show cause. In this case, a show cause report is required. And the show cause report is asking the institution or the candidate institution to demonstrate why its accreditation or candidate status should not be withdrawn. A show cause report will always include a request for a teach-out plan, and it will always include a show cause visit. The vice president liaison will accompany the follow-up team on a show cause visit. Another type of follow-up is called recommendation responses. These type of responses are submitted in conjunction with the annual institutional update. If you have a request for recommendation responses, it will be spelled out in your commission action. Unlike all of the other follow-up reports that I've talked about, which can be submitted by uploading them to the portal, the recommendation responses are submitted as part of the AIU. And later in this presentation, I will show you where in the portal you can submit these types of responses. Finally, we have what is called an out-of-cycle supplemental information report. So again, it's the use of the SIR. However, where the former SIR wasn't associated with an accreditation event, an out-of-cycle SIR can be requested at any time. It is not tied to an accreditation review. When it's requested, it is because the commission has learned of information that is considered concerning either to the commission or to the general public, and it questions an institution's compliance with the commission standards, requirements, policies, or procedures, or federal regulations. The commission may request a visit in conjunction with an out-of-cycle SIR. Where do we get this information from? It could come from one of your other accreditors. If you have a disciplinary accreditor and your institution has a finding of warning or probation from a disciplinary accreditor, we will follow up asking information. It could come from the United States Department of Education. It could come from an ongoing investigation. It could come from your State Department of Education, or it may come from media reports. We have several ways of monitoring the status of our institutions and the use of the out-of-cycle SIR. Sometimes associated with your follow-up report and or visit, you will see that the commission has directed a commission liaison guidance visit. This means that the vice president liaison for your institution has been requested to visit your institution to help you understand the commission's action, understand the commission's expectations, and provide guidance as you prepare the report or prepare for the visit. In the past 3 semesters, of course, we have been conducting our commission liaison guidance visits virtually. Nonetheless, the purpose remains the same. A commission liaison guidance visit may be requested for compliance issues, but they are always requested if the issue is non-compliance. Your commission liaison, the VP, may or may not be accompanied by another commission representative. So if your institution is requested to produce a follow-up report or host a visit, one of the very first things you want to do is to unpack the commission action. You want to thoroughly understand what the commission is requesting. So in the example that you see before you, you will notice that the type of report that is being requested is focused report. So you know if you're seeing focused report, it's associated with the MPPR, and there's going to be a visit. The next thing you want to look at are what are the specific elements that are being requested. So you can see those are enumerated: improvement of key indicators, published information. The commission will always spell out the specific areas of concern where they're expecting the institution to respond. We will always cite the standard, the requirement, or the policy so that you can go back to the source of that information to understand what the commission's expectations were. Finally, as you get toward the end of the commission action, you will notice whether or not there has been a visit associated with this particular request for follow-up. Let's look at another example. This one is a request for a monitoring report. So I see that word monitoring. It must mean that this issue is related to non-compliance. So there are two times we will ask for this monitoring report, either when the institution is in non-compliance or when the institution has recently returned to reaffirmation following non-compliance. So again, you're looking to see what kind of report it is. You want to note the due date so that you get it in on time. Again, you want to look at the specific standards that were the non-compliance issue, in this case, standards 3, 6, and requirement of affiliation 11. Then you want to look at the specifics. Although you are responding to the standard in its entirety, here were some areas of specific concern. So for example, number 1 says sufficient learning opportunities and resources to support the institution's programs of study and the students' academic progress, and faculty and other professionals who are sufficient in number. So when you write the report, you want to pay particular attention to the specific concerns of the commission. Again, if you go toward the end of the action, you will see that a follow-up team visit will follow the submission of the report. And then the recommendation responses that I spoke of earlier. This is what the language would look like. So they tell you when you should begin this reporting. So you will look, for example, commission actions now may say beginning in 2022. So in 2022, when you submit your AIU, that will be the time when you submit your recommendation responses. And you have to submit these every year leading up to your next accreditation review, whether, as in the case in this one, it would be the self-study, or it could be leading up to the MPPR. It will also tell you specifically what the institution should focus on. In this case, further evidence of investment in strategies to measure and assess the adequacy and efficient utilization of institutional resources. And I will be talking more about recommendation responses a little bit later. Finally, here is the out of cycle supplemental information report. So one key thing that you will notice is that this one begins staff acted on behalf of the commission. As I said, these can be requested at any time. It's because we are monitoring through media and through other external agencies and institutions' current status. So staff act on behalf of the commission to request this out of cycle supplemental information report. It will always tell you the due date, and it will always align with either standards, requirements, policies, or procedures. Another thing to note about a request for an out-of-cycle supplemental information report is that it will be accompanied by a letter from your Vice President Liaison that gives you more specifics about the information that should be included in your out-of-cycle SIR. Let's look now at some of the key policies, procedures, and guidelines. Throughout today's webinar, we have referenced and will continue to reference our policies, procedures, and guidelines, which can be found on our website. I already mentioned the teach out, plan, and template, but another policy that you will want to pay particular attention to is the one on follow-up reports and visits, procedures, and guidelines, which can also be found on this site. I said I wanted to talk a little bit more about recommendation responses because this is the only type of follow-up that does not require the submission of a report. So when it is time for you to submit your annual institutional update, you will go to your institution portal, look at the bar across the top, and you will see recommendations as you see circled here in red. When you click on the recommendations tab, an area will open up where you can provide a narrative response. Important to remember is that there are character limits for this response, 1,000 words or 6,000 characters, and you cannot upload any additional documentation. It is simply a narrative response where you talk about your progress in addressing the commission's concerns. You will submit these recommendation responses over multiple years until your next accreditation review, either the MPPR or the self-study. At that point, your iterative recommendation responses will be reviewed by peer evaluators, and they will either determine that you have sufficiently addressed the commission's recommendations, or they may continue those recommendations and ask you to continue to report as part of the AIU, and they may even issue new recommendations for the AIU for you to answer moving forward. As I mentioned, the recommendation responses are iterative. It is possible in the first year when you receive a request for a recommendation response to say, we haven't addressed this issue yet, or we've not made any progress on this issue yet. And then the next year, you may provide a little bit more information. But you want to be careful that by the time it's ready for peer review, either at the MPPR or self-study, you have provided sufficient cumulative information to indicate that your institution has made satisfactory progress in dealing with the commission's concerns. And with that, Dr. Corbett, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Faison. Now let's talk about the follow-up report. One of the questions, the first question that most institutions ask us is, do I need to address all of the criteria and the standards cited by the commission action? You will see that you may be cited for 1, 2, or maybe more standards. First of all, you need to demonstrate compliance with the standard as a whole. However, as Dr. Faison said, in the commission action, you will see about the specific areas that the commission wants you to pay attention in your supplemental information report, monitoring report, or focus report. So please pay particular attention to those recommendations listed in the commission action. Now, how do you organize the report? First, you should have a cover page. The introduction would be 5 pages maximum. In the introduction, you want to cite verbatim the commission action. Say the commission says, and then write the full action. You can provide some background information on the institution, some information that will provide the reader, the peer evaluator, a little bit more of a context about your institution. Then you will provide the substantive narrative and analysis. This will be 10 pages maximum per requirement of affiliation, accreditation standard, or other issue. So if, for example, the commission action includes 2 standards for accreditation, then you would be limited to 20 pages maximum for that substantive narrative and analysis. Please note that you can include graphics, you can include charts, you can include a lot of information, but please make sure that analysis is included as part of that narrative. Then you may include a conclusion, which may be 5 pages maximum, which would then, you would make the case to the commission why you are in compliance with that particular standard. You may also include some evidence with your report. Some reports, such as the out of cycle SIR, will allow for appended materials. However, for any of the others, for the regular supplemental information report, that evidence need to be bundled as part of the report into a single PDF, and all of it needs to be uploaded to the portal. What should your follow-up report document? Well, first of all, you should include systematic evidence, not assertions, not we're going to do. It should be, this is what the institution has done to demonstrate compliance. It should also provide evidence of consistency across operations and academic offerings. An example, if an institution is cited, if the commission action includes issues related to standard 5, you want to make sure you demonstrate compliance with standard 5 throughout all academic offerings, though you may choose some of the programs to provide an example of how you are implementing your assessment processes at the institution. You should provide evidence of current and sustainable compliance. A question always comes is, how far back should we go? You should go back to your latest report prior to that. But if it is possible to provide more of a context, then provide as much information as you can. But remember that it has to be current. It cannot be data from 2-3 years ago. 2-3 years ago would only provide the context. You need to provide data what's going on right now. But also there is a key word here, which is the word sustainable, and is that the commission needs to know that the institution can sustain whatever corrective measures have been implemented, that the institution can sustain those corrective measures in the future. As I said, is about implemented processes, but here the other key word is results. So this is not about we have an assessment plan or we have an institutional effectiveness plan, but this is how we have implemented. These are the results that we have found from our processes, and this is how we're using the results. That will be a key point in your analysis. And lastly, another piece that should be part of your follow-up report is, does your institution has the appropriate structures to ensure sustainability? That is, do you have the appropriate personnel? Do you have the appropriate policies, procedures in place to ensure that whatever measures that you have taken to demonstrate compliance, again, can continue in the foreseeable future? You should address all items in the commission action. Organize the report by each requested item. So it is okay to use subheadings. That would be a very good way to organize the report. Organize it by standard, by requirement, or by policy, depending on what was included in the commission action. You should write the report so that it clearly documents compliance. Compliance with the standards and compliance with the criteria. It is not recommended that you go criterion by criterion by criterion. You want to demonstrate compliance not only with the criteria, but also compliance with the standard. You want to demonstrate compliance with the requirement of affiliation. Some requirements of affiliation are very closely related with standard. You want to make sure that there is consistency in your compliance of the two. And again, it is important that you include analysis. What does the document say to you? You do not want to have the peer reviewers need to do the analysis for you. Providing raw data that does not include analysis is really not helpful for the peer evaluators. What the peer evaluators and the commission wants to see is that you have learned from analysis of that data. And again, what steps are you taking to sustain compliance? Provide documented evidence. Again, not just assertions. Provide examples, but if you just talk about the example in the document, in the narrative, without providing accompanying documentation, it does not make a sufficient case for you. Support every statement in your narrative with citations of documentation. This is very similar to what you have to do with your self-study report. Use documents that provide evidence that say this statement is accurate. Documents that say this is how we are implementing what we are summarizing in the report. Again, answers without evidence just aren't answers. They are just statements, but the commission needs to see how you have implemented whatever measures you're taking. Here are some examples of documentation. So for a report on assessment, for example, let's say standard 5, the commission often looks for evidence that the assessment structure is fulfilling its responsibilities. So it is not enough to say we have an assessment committee or we have an assessment plan. What you want to show is that the committee is actually doing its work. So you would provide documentation or evidence such as committee agendas, committee reports, and anything else if the committee has conducted a training session for your faculty on assessment. That is good evidence that you would need to provide. In some cases, you would have specific documents such as the strategic plan, your budget allocation bylaws, committee bylaws. Audited financial statements are usually required when it comes to standard 6. But what you want to do is you want to make sure to point the reader to the right place in that document where you want them to see. Particularly if it's a very large document, it is important that in your narrative, you point the reader to exactly what you want to see. In some cases, excerpts for bylaws, for example, or the faculty handbook, for example, can be a good way to demonstrate without having to use the entire document. Some documentation may be part of a bigger picture. So for example, if you want to talk about what the curriculum committee has been doing, you don't want to include all of the minutes of the curriculum committee. You might want to include an example that shows what the committee has been doing. That would be, for example, for standard 3. So rather than the full minutes of the meetings, you want to point out to the relevant text, to the relevant dates, or the relevant pieces of the report. So you may include the full report as part of your documentation, but you really want to help the reader, help the peer evaluator find the information that is most important for you. The other thing is focus on past and present, but not on the future. So what I say often to institutions is use past, present perfect. Think of the tense of the verb that you're going to use. You're going to use past tense, you want to use present perfect, you want to use the present. It is not as helpful if you only provide information on what you will do in the future. However, because you do need to demonstrate sustained compliance, it is also important for you to provide concrete details of that the work that needs to be done and when that work is expected to be done. Also focus on outcomes. As I said, it is not enough to say we have a plan. It is not enough to say we have the structure. We have an office that is in charge of this. You want to say, as opposed to, we have an institutional assessment plan. What we need to see is the assessment plan being carried out? Is the monitoring body fulfilling its responsibilities? If you have a strategic plan assessment committee, what are they doing? What decisions have they made? Please show that those decisions are being made based on analysis of the results of assessments that you have conducted. Be forthright and honest. Honesty is the best policy. If you're still not there, please tell us you are not there yet, but then show that there is something in place, there's structures in place to ensure that this is going to happen. Remember, we do have a standard too, which is called ethics and integrity, which means you're going to tell us the truth and you're going to say exactly what's going on. If there's a problem, explain the problem, explain why that is happening, and provide specific evidence of what steps you are taking to remedy the issue. This is particularly important, for example, when you are doing recommendations, responses in conjunction with the AIU. In conjunction with the AIU, we expect that it will be iterative, as Dr. Faison said. So we will want to see progress from one year to the other. But also the worst thing you can do is repeat what you said last year and say it again the second year and say it again the third year. What you want to do is you want to demonstrate progress. However, when it comes to a supplemental information report or a monitoring report, that is your one chance, and you need to demonstrate what is going on and what steps you are taking to remedy the situation. And while having said all that, you should also be concise, to be well organized. Please remember that our peer evaluators are very busy people. They are volunteers and they are giving their time and energy to help our institutions improve. As I said, do not include raw data. You should not have irrelevant documentation. What the peer evaluators want to see is they don't want to see 50 pages of data. What they want to see is your summary. You want to see your analysis and what you have learned from those results and what actions you are taking in order to address those results. So make the report easy to follow. As I said, you can use subheadings, you can use charts, bulleted list. You could use, if you want, you could use footnotes, but please make the text easy to see, but also provide sufficient background and context. So it is not enough to say, for example, oh, we implemented this new initiative and because we needed to increase our revenue and we got $200,000 out of this. But what is the context? Were you expecting to earn $200,000 or were you expecting to earn another $1 million? So how providing that context for whatever information you are giving is really relevant so the peer evaluator can see what those numbers mean for you. So as I said, follow-up reports are usually about 10 pages, what we said, 10 pages per standards, but you may use more for that additional evidence that you are going to append as part of the single PDF for that report. Now let's move on to uploading the report. You are very familiar with our portal by now, I assume. So the reports are uploaded via the secure MSCHE portal. So what you will do is you will click on that box for reviews. If you're uploading a focus report, this is what you will look like. Notice that we have the midpoint review up on top. And then as part of that midpoint review, there was a focus report that was required. And then you will download the institution action history report, which is your statement of accreditation status. And then you can upload the report and evidence. And once you will upload in any same way that you upload any other document to the portal. But notice the grayed out areas. The grayed out areas means that that card or that item is not available yet. And a lot of times the reason why it's not available yet is because you have not clicked the complete box in the previous item. So one thing that I would like to definitely recommend is once you have finished uploading, once you have finished downloading all of those reports, uploading any data, please remember to click complete. Because when you click complete, you will be able to see the next card. That is where, if you have a monitoring report for a visit, for example, that's where you will see the team roster. So you won't be able to see the team roster until you click complete. You will not be able to then affirm the roster or see the team report unless you have completed check complete in the previous cards. So uploading other types of follow-up reports. This is an example for uploading a monitoring report. And again, you will see the first thing is the institution action history report that you will download, click complete. Then where you click view is where you upload report and evidence. That will take you to the submission page. And then you will see team roster, affirm team roster, team report, but you will see that there's also a little arrow on the right. There are further cards over on the right. So you will see more. You need to click on that arrow to see what's next on the other one, because you will need to submit an institutional response to the team report, and you won't be able to see it unless you click that little arrow. Let's now talk about the follow-up visit. Sometimes, as Dr. Faison said, the commission action includes a follow-up visit. These are required when an institution has been placed on warning, probation, or show cause. The follow-up visits, just like the evaluation, the on-site evaluation visit, team visit, these are usually scheduled to ensure that the team report, institution response, and the confidential brief will be completed, submitted at least 2 weeks prior to the next scheduled meeting of the committee and follow-up activities. The committee and follow-up activities, that is the committee of the commission that normally reviews follow-up reports. Your vice president liaison, if there is a follow-up visit, your VP liaison will be in contact with you to determine the best date for the visit. And as I said, it will be scheduled far enough in advance of the committee and follow-up activities, so all of the reports, there is sufficient time for all the reports to be submitted. Your VP liaison will identify the teams, and the teams may request additional evidence either before or during the visit. And you are responsible for uploading that additional evidence to the portal. If additional evidence is allowed, you will see an additional documents link. Not all follow-up reports require a visit. So if it does not require a visit, you will not see an additional documents link in your on the portal. The follow-up team is the size of the team really depends on the type of report and how many standards need to be addressed on that report. The commission will assign a team of peer evaluators according to its peer evaluators policy and the peer evaluators procedure. The background and expertise of the team members will depend on which standards. So for example, if it's about standard 5, then it will be an expert on assessment. If it's about standard 6, it will be somebody, a chief financial officer, and an expert on institutional finances in higher education. The commission staff liaison or your VP liaison may accompany the team, but the VP liaison is not a member of the team. It is not, that person is not an evaluator, and that person is there to provide support for the team and support for the institution to clarify commission policies and procedures, not to ask questions and serve as an evaluator. When you plan the follow-up visit, those visits typically last 1 to 2 days. The team chair will set the visit schedule in consultation with the institution, but also with the VP liaison. The peer evaluators will interview campus constituencies. They will interview people from campus whose jobs are directly connected with the issues that are being addressed in the follow-up report. Just like in a regular evaluation visit, the peer evaluators are there to clarify, to verify the information provided in the report. And as opposed to the evaluation visit, no social events are expected during the follow-up visit. Usually the team arrives the evening before, they conduct the interviews for one day, they work on the report during that evening, and the next day they provide the oral exit report. What does the follow-up visit schedule include? It usually includes on that first full day of interviews, a meeting with the president or CEO, meeting with the governing board, a meeting with the leaders of the people that work directly on the issues addressed in the standard. And often it also includes a meeting, an open meeting with faculty, an open meeting with students. That will happen, those interviews will happen during that first day. And the second day, it is only 2 things. The team chair meets with the president or CEO to give that person an advance information on what the team report will say, and then they will conduct the open oral exit report that all members of the community are invited to attend. But please remember that the work of the team is only the first level. The Middle States Commission of Higher Education uses a multi-level process of analysis. It is a 3-level process. So the peer evaluator or the teams are only the first step. The next step for follow-up reports, the report, the institutional response, the confidential brief are reviewed by the Committee on Follow-up Activities. And then the Committee on Follow-up Activities makes an official recommendation to the commission. At the next commission meeting, that's when the commission will make a decision about accepting, about the conclusions, about compliance, or whatever it is that the report is addressing. The commission will make that decision at the next meeting. And as you know, the commission meets 3 times a year. And finally, let me remind you that your MSC VP liaison is your friend. We are here to work with you. Please feel free to email, telephone, or now Zoom with questions. You would have been able to meet in commission offices, not at this point, unfortunately, but you can certainly meet in Zoom. You can request the VP liaison to come visit your campus. That is an additional request that you would have to do. You need to talk to your VP liaison on what's involved with that. But one thing that I want to remind you is that your VP liaison cannot review your draft report. You can ask your VP about whatever you have included in your report, you can ask for what should be included, but your liaison cannot review actually your draft of the report. And that is it for this part of the presentation.